For more on this story, let's bring in David Camroux, professor at Sciences Po Paris. Professor, there are reports that a group of ethnic armies launched a deadly attack on a police station in Shan state as armed groups joined forces with the anti-coup protest movement. Do you fear a sudden escalation of violence?
Yes, indeed. I mean, we're heading towards a civil war. Now we've got the ethnic groups not only on the border with Thailand, but also on the border with India, being willing to be part of a federal army. And so we've now got a junction between the civil disobedience movement, which is essentially in that large the main towns in the Burma heartland, and also the armed ethnic organizations, which have under their command some 100,000 soldiers.
And the UN Security Council met once again to discuss the situation in Myanmar, and they said harsh words against the junta. In your views, what's the kind of diplomatic breakthrough that's needed, that needs to happen?
Well, we need to have to raise the question of which is the legitimate government of Myanmar. And we now have a government in exile being set up by something called the CRPH, the committee representing, well, translates as the Union Parliament, have said they've abolished the 2008 constitution, which gave these particular powers to the military, and talking about creating a new constitution to create a federal democracy. Now, once we have that clearly a government in exile, then we are faced with a situation in front of the United Nations, but for all of the countries of the world, which is the legitimate government of Myanmar. Once that government in exile is recognized, then we can then talk about invoking what is called R2P, the right to protect. When a state asks for the support of the international community to deal with an internal problem. So we will solve the question, is this foreign intervention in the affairs of a sovereign state? No, it'll be one called for by the government of that particular state. I think that is the breakthrough that's required. And what's important is that in today's age, we don't actually have to have that government in exile physically in one place. That government in exile can exist virtually, which it's doing for the moment, spreading its message, asking for support in Tokyo, in London, in New York. And so we have a potential for a breakthrough, which will allow, for example, China and the United States to see that they have a common interest in re-establishing a democratic government in Myanmar.
Well, you just mentioned China there. China is one of the junta's main international backers, but Beijing has been voicing concern about instability on its southern border. Do you think the Chinese will do more than the gentle rebukes? Perhaps in your future scenario, would they be able to recognize a different government?
Yes, because China needs Myanmar more than the other way around. I mean, what Myanmar provides to China is energy security, basically through gas and petrol on the pipelines that are being built, which go to Kunming in southern China. They don't particularly, the China in Beijing, they don't particularly like the military. I think they were embarrassed by the coup. They have been somewhat neutral, but if they stop the arms supply, for example, I think they may be willing to do that. They don't want instability on their borders either. We now have people going across the border into China. The number of COVID cases has increased in these border towns because there's actually no tracing going on in Myanmar at the moment. There's no vaccination going on because basically the state is falling apart.
Right.
And that's not within the Chinese interest. The Chinese interest is to have a stable Myanmar, irrespective of who governs it. The military has shown that they're incapable, and so the return to the statu quo ante with a hybrid regime, with a strong civilian government, is in China's interest.
All right, that's all we have time for, I'm afraid. Thank you so much for your analysis, David Camroux, professor at Sciences Po.